This is getting serious. Whoa!
Serious Sam 3 BFE is an simulator released in 2011 for the PC, 2012 for the Xbox 360, and 2014 for the PlayStation 3. God help you if you actually played the console releases. What Vanquish did for the third-person shooter, Serious Sam 3 kinda sorta does for the first-person shooter. This time, one of the game's slogans was all man, no cover, outright denouncing cover-based shooters as a whole. It's a game that tries to bring back the feel of the golden age of shooters. Very arcadey with hordes of enemies converging to fuck your shit up. No regenerating health and an impossibly large arsenal of weapons all on hand at any moment. Serious Sam is meant to parody modern shooters whilst curtailing the heels of the likes of Doom and Duke Nukem. Right off the bat you can tell that the game is a very uncluttered HUD, showing only the essentials on the screen very unobtrusively. You may have also noticed that any form of a map is also absent, but luckily that's not a bad thing. It helps keep the secrets well hidden, and the linearity of the levels usually leaves the route you need to take fairly obvious, and naturally it keeps your view unobscured. Other old school conventions include overheal, overarmor, and the ability to run forever. Some conventions that follow more modern shooters involve being able to aim down the sights with a couple weapons and the ability to manually reload. Nothing necessarily has been tweaked with the formula, but it all still feels natural. Through and through, the game is all about killing Mental's seemingly unending army of mutant alien soldiers. The levels consist of large, expansive arenas and a fair share of smaller, more closed-off environments. The game takes place in Cairo, directly after Mental wiped out most of the entirety of the human race. If you don't know, Mental is this godlike entity that purges the galaxy every 100,000 years, just for the fun of it. Sam, assumedly having been buried under mountains of booze and women for the past 3 years, takes up a call to arms in order to unlock the mysteries to using an ancient device known as the Time Lock in order to stop Mental by teleporting to the past, where the first game takes place. The rest of the game is just you doing this or that, which is needed to advance to the next part to get to the thing that will save the world or whatever. Unsurprisingly, Serious Sam isn't very story-centric. Apart from some very simple puzzles that usually just involve pulling a lever or finding a key, the game is a straightforward shooter. A majority of the enemies have either slow projectile-based attacks or will charge at you, sometimes both. It's your job to dodge incoming attacks while dealing out the damage as well. The heart of the all-man, no-cover sentiment would have you running around the battlefield dodging incoming attacks while keeping the enemy at bay. However, some enemy combinations could involve you having to think more on your feet. That would be pretty great if it weren't for these gray soldier-type enemies. These guys not only blend into their environment, making them hard to spot, but they also have hit-scan weapons, meaning that as long as you're in their line of sight, there's no way to dodge their bullets. They feel incredibly out of place amidst all the colorful and unique monsters, and their weapons go so far against the nature of Serious Sam that they're nothing but a detriment. Now you're forced to use cover because these assholes can take pot shots at you from any angle. They make every encounter they appear in a chore to deal with. I'm more at ease with the scorpion enemies since at least they pop out more and you can actually dodge their fire. There are other enemies which I think the game could have done without, like the witch brides or the cave demons who accomplish nothing but to piss you off and waste your time. But the Greys definitely would have been the best ones to do away with, in my opinion. Luckily, the rest of the enemies, Mancubus notwithstanding, are all unique and interesting. Blowing up scores of kamikazes is always a good time, while some other enemies can feel like you're just checking off a to-do list by pumping the prescribed amount of missiles into them. Most of the game just has you moving forward, with every inch you take defended by 3 million enemy units. Most of the enemies are just a simple matter of shoot at it until it dies, although some weapons are more effective than others, and in some cases you can pull off an instant melee kill if you're close enough. How you manage your ammo supply and which weapons you use for certain enemies adds a bit of strategy to how you play, but how ammo is laid out between the levels can also seem like you're under the influence of the developers for which weapons should be used for a given scenario. The worst offender would be the ammo crate. These can be either missiles or C4. If you happen to find a missile crate, there's really no reason not to just spam your missiles at everything that moves. Just defend the crate with your life and an infinite wall of missiles. Not that you can't have fun with that, but it happens a bit more often than I'd like and starts to get repetitive after a while. Most of the guns you get are fairly typical, with a few creative ones. The more guns you get, and the bigger they become, the game starts throwing much more and much bigger enemies at a time. Mowing them all down is a satisfying feeling to say the least. Could have kicked up a bit less dust, but otherwise it's pretty enjoyable. However, sometimes the spacing between getting a weapon or even finding ammo for the weapon can be long and drawn out, filled with you killing the same enemies over and over and over again, slowly making your way forward. One of the biggest ways the game makes itself feel like such a grind is the lack of environments. The entire 10-hour game consists of you walking through the desert and war-torn cities. Occasionally you'll find yourself in an archaeological dig or an ancient ruin, but it's all the same yellow, brown, and gray as far as the eye can see. Every tomb you enter seems to look the exact same, and unique environments are few and far between. I realized the game was developed by an indie studio and that assets are extremely time-consuming to make, but the game was far too drab considering the entire essence of Serious Sam is to make fun of brown and gray shooters, but it just does the same thing with a permanent Egyptian aesthetic. Graphically, the game looks fantastic. Horrible character animations aside, it runs really well with a myriad of options you can play around with. I especially like the customizable blood options. But all the graphical options in the world can't save your game if all the areas just seem to blend together. Here's a rundown of all the areas in the game. Gray City, overgrown museum followed by dark basement, desert, desert, tomb, desert, tomb, desert, desert, oasis, desert. Yeah, you get the idea. Even with more powerful guns, the sheer amount of enemies you start to encounter towards the end just slows your progression down to a crawl. You'll clear an area out of enemies only to walk forward 3 steps and have 200 more teleport in, particularly that last level, holy shit. Couple that with the bland music that plays during these seemingly exciting moments in the repetitive desert environments, and things start seeming very dull. You know that bitchin' track that plays during the trailer for the game in the beginning of this video?
Whoa!
Yeah, by my count that only plays 3 times in the entire game. Once during a very short segment with some kamikazes, a short boss fight, and then again during the credits. About 99% of the game consists of this very Middle Eastern sounding tribal music that can pick up some intensity during large fights, but it's a shame there wasn't nearly enough metal. It seems all the metal tracks were only used once for boss fights, and those were always incredibly short. Here are just a few samples from the various fight themes. Now here's one of the boss themes. Can you hear the difference? Now, I'm no musical genius, maybe these fight tracks are actually really good, they certainly fit the setting, but when I saw the trailer and I heard that blood-pumping metal, I couldn't help but be disappointed when it was used so infrequently. Not all the fight tracks are bad, but most of them just lack the impact they ought to. Normally I'm impartial to any kind of metal, but it definitely could have been put to better use in the game. It would have been annoying to hear nothing but metal for the entire duration, but there are just too many large encounters and not enough tracks to differentiate them. Instead, you just hear someone trying to hit their bongos for the billionth time as if they're trying to count every single grain of sand in the desert. Again, I know, indie studio, limited budget, blah blah blah, but take this for instance. The last level before the final boss is a really great track. It's split into 4 parts, growing in intensity as the level progresses, but you'll be hearing the same tune on loop for an hour or more. I've railed on this game pretty hard, but even with all its problems, you can still find a way to have fun with Serious Sam 3. The type of gameplay that Serious Sam offers is always a nice treat to go back to, a mindless distraction filled with endless mutilation. After you've beaten the game, it's up to you to pick which degree of intensity of gameplay you want to revisit. There are tons of hidden secrets to find along the way, so repeat playthroughs don't necessarily have to be boring. The ham-fisted juvenile humor the game sprinkles about can be pretty cringeworthy at times.
All your base or belong to us, motherfucker!
But occasionally borders on the so bad it's good juncture that it can be forgivable.
What are you screaming for? The pain hasn't even started yet.
Or perhaps Croatians just aren't funny. Multiplayer also comes in a variety of different game modes. I find the co-op campaign to be a particularly enjoyable venture of beautiful chaos. Taking on hordes of enemies by yourself is fun, taking on hordes of enemies with up to 15 friends or strangers is a completely new, fun experience all its own. In summary, Serious Sam 3 is a decent visit to a genre long forgotten, sporting an HD sheen, doing what Duke Nukem Forever wanted to do but better, though not without its own shortcomings. Personally, I prefer the older Serious Sam games, but this one's still enjoyable nonetheless. Overall, it's okay.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio.
Whoa!